So we thought we'd bring everyone together at the end, all the speakers who could stay on, just to give us some final reflections on questions. So if you've got any final questions you would like answered, please do add those to the Q&A. But I'm going to kick off with a few questions that have been asked during the day and haven't been answered yet. So and this is open to all speakers to answer if they would like to. One question is, thank you for this talk, but asking the speakers, I'd love to hear more from the British members of the panel, I presume that's white British, on their thoughts regarding the actions presented during the talk on allyship, whether anyone has experience of being an ally, sort of actively developing their ally skills. We've got everybody, fantastic, thank you so much. So yeah, it's whether any of the speakers would like to reflect on the ally skills that were shared in terms of their own experience, or how to put that in the context of their own work. If not, I'm going to move to the next question.
I can try and say something. I think this is something that came up at the Linnean Society because we have been reflecting, we have been doing a lot of reflection on our fellowship and how to be more inclusive in our fellowship, and this reflection has been going on for months. Certainly Black Lives Matter has pushed it to the forefront of how we're thinking about it, but part of the thinking also is that not all the tasks should rely on the Black and ethnic minorities staff members. And so there is, and I was quite interested to listen to that talk, thinking, you know, I don't have a lot of experience in there, so and I think there was someone in the chat who said something quite similar. How do I know that I'm not putting my foot wrong? So it's kind of a balance between taking on my role as an ally, which I had never heard of before, so I was quite interested to hear about it, and helping the Linnean Society go into the right direction with the support of, you know, my Black and ethnic minority colleagues. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my take on it.
It's interesting to hear those conversations are happening, and perhaps this provides a framework to help moving them forward.
That's interesting. That's a really useful contribution there about the idea of putting one's foot wrong. Because in any co-learning situation, putting one's foot wrong is the best way to know how to put it right, so to speak. So if there's a more shared sense of allyship, yeah, where we're co-supportive, where the playing ground feels level enough. So I think in a way I would want to push this more into creating environments where there can be mutual learning and therefore mutual progress.
I think to some extent it's understanding the support you get from your own organisation as well. It's something we've been kind of grappling with, particularly with the Black Lives Matter movement. We've been doing a lot of stuff on Twitter recently, and actually talking about the talk that I gave today, it was promoted by Manchester Museum last week, and we got quite a lot of abuse from various, mostly trolls off Twitter. And it's kind of understanding how you deal with those things, which a lot of them are bots, so they're not actually even real people. And also supporting staff and knowing you have that support as well.
Giving you confidence. Molly and Hannah, I was interested if you know of networks or kind of frameworks of supporting allyship. So I understand from your model that you train people. Do they come to you? Do you go to them? How do you work that?
I don't know, is House still on? I didn't see his
No, sorry, I think he might have left us.
Okay, then I'll answer. I didn't want to step on. He's been involved in the network longer than I, so I was going to let him speak to it. But our specific network is very regional. It's very US centric, first of all, of course, but it's actually even Gainesville, Florida centric. And we're actually not part of the university on purpose for that reason, but we serve mostly you know, our university, our network, and most of us are academics that work within the network. And how we were trained, and yes, we do basically a 1 hour intro to ally skills, which we turned into the 15-minute talk that you all saw today, which was the first time we'd ever tried to do an ally skills 101 in 15 minutes, by the way. So we left a lot out. We usually do just a 1 hour, and we do that a lot at departmental seminars and in places like conferences, etc. But then what we really do is we do a 3-hour half-day intro to ally skills workshops, which is really kind of the main focus of our group. And we were all trained through Frameshift Consulting, which is a California-based consulting firm that works on a variety of topics such as allyship. And they're actually based out of the tech industry. So very related to academia, but actually a little different, which has been very kind of enlightening as well. We learned a lot from the tech industry, which I'm not going to say that they're ahead of academia, but they definitely have very similar issues, but different ones as well. So hopefully that answers the question. And get to Mama D's talk about being uncomfortable. We talk a lot about just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And in our 3-hour workshops, we actually do a lot of small group work and scenarios. So it's actually not a lot of like presentations where we talk at people. We actually do a spiel that gives everyone these basic definitions and kind of a framework to speak to each other, and then a code of conduct to speak to each other. And then we do a series of scenarios where we hopefully create, you know, very real world scenarios that deal with oppression and deal with microaggressions and marginalization, and then we discuss them. And hopefully, I hope our participants feel in a safe place where people can make mistakes and people can say what they're thinking and you know, learn and grow. And I know, for instance, as a instructor, I learn way more from participants, I feel like, each time that I do it as well. So it's definitely a co-created, everyone's learning environment. At least that's what we strive for.
Fantastic to hear of examples where this is working. And I think we've seen even through today that we've been open to, we've made some mistakes, we've felt uncomfortable perhaps, and we'll grow and learn from that. Being open and reflective and working together is really important part of that process. I'm going to pick up on a comment that Mama D made in the chat, which was that in the context of the trauma experienced by perpetrators of colonial crimes, which still continue, we should also understand that allyship can be a two-way street. This might be more in terms of thinking about critical friends, but as an important part of museum responses to acts of decolonisation. And I just wondered, Mama D, if you might be happy to expand on that, or if anyone else wanted to comment on that.
So I'd shared in the chat also a paper that I co-wrote with Marina Chang, which is looking at systems of violence across time and space, looking particularly at the food system, but also expanding that idea of food as the ways in which we all feel nourished, and recognizing in that the role that the food journey, which is this interactive workshop which Rianne spoke of earlier on, how it tries to address the trauma that gets experienced as guilt. You know, people refer to white guilt. And then what flows from that is a sense of fragility, i.e. we cannot get uncomfortable, yeah? So what Molly refers to is trying to help that process, which is, you know, maybe one can view it as a rites of passage or something like this. It's something that one is inevitably going to move through because the past has been violence. So to interrogate it, some of that violence is going to rub off, you know, if you like. And so it's helping people to understand that violence begets violence, and somehow we've got to try to transform it into palatable and accessible learning so that we can move beyond it. That's what we want to do, all of us, to move beyond it. So it's enabling people in all the populations that were colonized or oppressed to be able to have those conversations. And conversation can mean video interviews, conversation can mean sit down conversations, you know, can be sharing food, can be sharing stories. You know, I just think of all the resources in the different populations. I'm going to be engaging with somebody at the National Maritime Museum, looking at, you know, Indian history related to Caribbean history, which is going to be so interesting, right? So it's South-South conversations as well as South-North. It's not just between, you know, the archetypal global South and global North, but it's lots of micro conversations all over the world. And that we can be allies to each other. We can support each other to have those conversations, because we all are traumatized by that past, which, you know, if it stays uninterrogated, it remains there as a low simmering trauma, but we want to get rid of that, right? We want to move beyond it. So yeah, that was really what I was trying to say. But the essay is there if you dare read it. It's a bit dense, but it does go into a bit more of that.
Yeah, and your reading material is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. Would anyone else like to comment on that? Jack?
It's good. A few thoughts going through my head based on what Mamadi just said, what Rachel said about the term decolonization. So what Mamadi said about kind of trauma and violence and the violent history, and what David said about troll pushback, and also what Sabaja said a couple of weeks ago in an event at Colchester Museums with Liam Wiseman. Liam said that when we talk about the history of racism, we're not talking, it's not black history, it's white history. And that, you know, that isn't a particularly effective way of reflecting the, you know, the wonderful contributions of people of color and non-white audiences to non-white contributors to history of science. But where I'm getting with this, I guess, is that a lot of what we talk about when we say let's tell the truth about what's happened in the past, let's be honest and let's, you know, do the right thing and open up the history of violence and empire in our museums, we generally think about I don't know, this is generalization. My assumption is we generally think about the colonized people as coming into the museum and seeing more of their history represented, more of themselves represented. But another impact on this is perhaps that those people who might be inclined to push back about the idea of decolonization and to troll museums, criticize museums, might be, if we don't call it decolonization, we just lay clear the history of acts of aggression and annexation and settlement. And it might make people not realize that we're decolonizing and, you know, rewriting history. We're just telling the history, and actually the kind of the traditional museum white audiences will benefit from, well, benefit's not the right word, will be impacted by that in a way that helps the kind of decolonization movement generally. That was a complete ramble. I don't know if that made sense.
It's okay, it's complex, and there's a lot encompassed in this, isn't it? It's revealing histories, it's understanding contemporary effects, it's understanding what's been erased and how we can bring that back in, and all sorts of things under this, and many conversations to be had. Would anyone else like to respond to that? Padre.
Apologies for everything being so dark. It's not a metaphor, it's just a really badly lit room. I thought Jack was remarkably eloquent. It wasn't a ramble at all. I think what we get scared about is making mistakes, which, by the way, if this is a new feeling to you, welcome to being brown in the museum sector. I spend every day wondering whether I'm going to make a misstep to get myself fired. And so there's an aspect of that. What I wanted to add to it was not every single black and brown person you will encounter is by default going to be engaged in this process to the same degree. The very obvious examples of Kimi Badenoch, Priti Patel, and all the other brown people who for some reason decide they want to be Tories. So these aspects are complicated, and we all have privileges and we all exist at the intersections. I think that's what Mamadi was saying was so important, was, you know, there are aspects to each of our identities whereby we have our privilege. So yes, we are mindful of stepping on each other because we know what it feels like to be stepped on. But equally, we know what it feels like to not be acknowledged and to feel oppressed. So we have it within all of us. It's the work of all of us to do this.
I was just going to make the comment as well that I've been thinking about how to talk to people about empire, and really thinking that actually most people are fairly apathetic about it. They don't know a lot about it. They don't really have strong opinions, good or bad or whatever. And we really have a big responsibility to talk about empire, what it is, how it affected people, and where it sits within our collection. And I think that's a massive step we've all got to kind of really step up to the table with as soon as possible with museums, because it's not going to come with the curriculum anytime soon, I don't think. So I think we've got a massive opportunity there.
Just wanting to say that up in the north of England, there is the resource of the Racial Justice Network, which are based in Leeds, Bradford, and they are really overworked and overstretched. I must say that as well before you approach them. They have been forming networks of learning, so kind of white allyship groups, where they have a program of learning that people can join and get together and discuss things. That's certainly worth signing up to, that kind of thing. But to also throw some resources their way would be a good thing too, because they're doing incredible work up in the north of England.
Thank you for flagging that, Mamadi. I know Birgit had a question or a contribution.
Yes, thanks. I was more in the interested question to the panel. I mean, just considering the current political situation, you know, sort of looking at that the government seeks to undo the teaching of critical race theory in school, for example, and there's still, you know, the curriculum, the way it has been revised under Gove, you know, it's just, you know, isn't that moving the baseline lower again? And, you know, and where do you think your work should start, and how does it affect your work within museums? Because, you know, you have to think about what kind of background, educational background from within this country people come from in order just to engage with these questions. There was just one comment about, you know, how much people do actually know about the history of empire and so on. So, you know, I can just see it as this backward move as well. You know, here we are launching forward into these amazing discussions and all of the work that you've done. But what do you think will happen in the next, say, 4 years or so? You know, just of the way the ideology changes in this country at the moment, but also as a consequence, where will the funding come from? And also, interestingly, then, you know, as a sort of amazing move, that's what Miranda mentioned this morning, of at the, I believe it was the Hunterian Museum, where they have a curator of discomfort, I think, and then at the Wellcome, a curator of inclusion, which are fantastic moves. And surely this is taking a while to come to this point in, you know, writing the job descriptions for curators like that, and getting them into place. And just wanted to get a sense from maybe this fantastic collective group which has come together here, of where you think this is going to go in the next 4 or 5 years.
Subhadra, would you like to answer that?
Thank you. Yes, I think it's an excellent question. And yeah, it does seem very precarious with some of the things the government has said recently. But I think the answer is it's going to keep going where we take it, and where we keep going. I think, particularly talking to this room, the teaching of evolution as fact in schools has been banned in certain countries and in certain places. Does not stop evolution being a compelling scientific argument. So it is a question of how we continue to do the work that we do. Yeah, the curriculum is not going to catch up anytime soon, I don't think, but schools come to museums and they read our labels as facts. And so if we are the ones in charge and running this conversation, we have to do the little bit that we can. It won't be everything. There are still parents who talk to their children. There are still trolls on the internet. But yeah, we just don't need to be part of that anymore. I think, can I just say, it's been, like, NATSCA is just the best conference, you guys know that anyway, but it's so wonderful to be in a room where the paper that I am giving is not the one that stands out. It's just one of many along the same lines and speaking the same language. There's so many of us. There's more of us than we think there are sometimes. So that's my response. Is it goes where we take it, and I'm optimistic for the places that we are going now. This is such a wonderful room to be in.
Thank you, Supadra. That's incredible, and something for us all to really think about. And again, the importance of community, and that's something that NatSCA really tries to use our platforms and our channels for as much as possible. So perhaps we're kind of coming towards, we've got 3 minutes left, but are there any final reflections or questions? I don't want to leave that from the panel if we're in this space right now, or should we finish on that note? Yeah, seems a great place to leave it. Thank you so much. So I wanted to say just a really special thanks to all our speakers today for coming here, for sharing your practice, your experience, your perspectives and your ideas, for all the great conversations. I personally have learned a huge amount. We've got a really great legacy resource that'll come together, that'll be delivered online, so the conversation can continue and the learning can continue. And I look forward to seeing how your projects progress as well. I wanted to say thank you to our attendees for joining us today. We really appreciate all the chat and your participation, your time. Please do look out for the recorded versions and share those on with other people who you think might be interested when they do come out. It should be about a week or so, but we'll share that through our Twitter and blog and all that kind of thing. Finally, I wanted to say a huge thank you to our committee. NatSCA is a charity run by volunteers from our membership. We've all been affected in various ways through the current pandemic, through furlough, illness, caring responsibilities, additional work responsibilities. So I've seen behind the scenes just the amount of work and dedication people have put in to bring this to you. And I hope it's been an enjoyable conference and that you've learned a lot. I certainly have. Particular thanks to Donna Young for collating the programme and liaising with all the speakers, to Glenn Rodley, our amazing tech host, who has just gone out of his way to try and make this run as smoothly as possible, backed up by Justine Orr. Thank you to Jack Ashby, David Gelsthorpe, Claire Brown, and Jan Friedman on Twitter as well today, and to all the NatSCA committee for supporting that. So please keep in touch. Perhaps the release of the recordings is the first way to do that. Keep following us, and we have a conference every year. We're planning another conference around May this year, so keep an eye out for that. And it's kind of strange finishing off a virtual conference, isn't it? Because it's all, Glenn's going to boot us out in a minute.
We can have a round of applause nevertheless.
Can we have a round of applause, please? That's a great idea.
Well done. Thanks very much.